Hello and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast for this week. This week we talk to Natalie Davison, who works both as a property realtor and as an amazing marketing expert. We get so much good advice if you're looking at brands and how your brand is perceived, how to make your brand more authentic. This is an amazing chat, one of the best conversations we've had, definitely about marketing, and you'll love it too. Enjoy, and as always, have a magical week. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast for this week. Excitingly, we have a guest this week, so you may have seen that by the title of the podcast, and we'll get to them shortly. But first of all, let's check in with the team and see how they're going. So, Danette, how is your week going?
My week is really good. I am dog sitting, which since we've been talking about this little fella, I'm going to see if he'll come out. He's hiding at my feet at the moment. He's been guarding me all morning. So this is Hero. And he is my parents' dog that they got last weekend. So I went and picked him up last weekend. He noticed the noise he's making. So he's awesome as a Chihuahua because he's as quiet as a mouse. So that's been my week, looking after Hero and running a couple of workshops. So yeah, it's been great. Thanks, Jez.
Nice. And if you are just listening, you can go on Spotify and check out the video version of that so you can check out that dog. Highly recommend it for the full experience there. Grahame, I'll go to you now. How's your week been?
Hey, Jez. Yeah, my week's been a mixed bag of fun and frivolity and thunderstorms and power outages, 28 mils of rain in 10 minutes, and a lot of driving. So I'm in downtown Dubbo at the moment, heading north.
Oh, wow.
It's been a good week so far.
Wow, a lot going on there. Hopefully you don't get flooded while we're recording this podcast.
No, that was at home, so hopefully home isn't flooded.
Yeah, true. John, how are you going this week?
Hey, Jez. Hey, everyone. Yeah, really good. Just been dealing with people that like to be doomsdayers, and you know this activity is going to take forever. It's going to take weeks, and blah blah blah. And you go, it's really not, and you get it done in a day, and people look at you and go, how'd you do that? It's like, it wasn't hard, people, really. So yeah, look, it's been a fun week, and we're at the end of it, which is really good.
I didn't think we'd had a conversation this week, John, but there you go. I was wrong.
Absolutely, you were wrong. I spoke to Matt too. I'll talk to you about that later.
Also, John, maybe have you considered that you are a superhero? You're just cleaning up these things, doomsday.
No, just dealing with idiots.
And for those who are just listening, you need to have a look at the video because John does actually have a cape of sorts on.
Somehow I don't think so.
Awesome. Well, John, we're looking forward to having you here today to, any problems we have, if anything goes wrong, we know you're here to fix it. So appreciate
yeah, good luck with that. I've flexed off.
And Natalie, before we introduce you properly, how's your week been?
My week's been awesome, but I can't stop thinking about the fact that you just told me about all that rain because we're having a snowstorm where I am right now. So I just drove home for this call, and the car in front of me had their flashing lights on the whole way. The road's covered in snow. Cars are going in the ditch. And I was like, oh, that's not something you probably experience that often, is it?
Well done on making it in for the podcast. We really appreciate it.
We now have snow envy. Natalie, can you take your camera and microphone and stuff outside just for 5 minutes?
Oh, wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's nighttime here and dark out, and there's not much to see. But that would be good. I can send you a photo tomorrow, maybe.
Please do.
Yeah, wow. Well, thanks so much for being on, everybody. It sounds like it's been a wild time. My week's been very chill, so this is very wild, but I'm glad everyone's here. Also, the voice that you just heard is Natalie Davison. Natalie, we're so happy to have you on. We're going to be talking about brands today, and I was just wondering, for people that may be being introduced to you for the first time today, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and then also why you picked this topic today?
Sure. So my name is Natalie Davison. I have a couple of businesses. One of those is Marrow Marketing. And at Marrow, we are brand integrity coaches, and we help small business owners take control of their brand and have ownership of their brand. So that's really the work that I do. So the reason I chose this topic is because I think it's so relevant to all small business owners But as we get into the conversation, maybe even beyond that, it's relevant to us as consumers to understand the relationships that we have with the products and services that we engage in. And I just thought it'd be a lot of fun to chat about with all y'all.
Yeah, well, it's a great topic. It's like a little bit, we usually have some about leadership and stuff. So this is a perfect different one because I love when we get to mix it up. We get to find out new information, that's in a different area sometimes. And branding is one I'm always fascinated in. So this was a perfect topic. I love that you picked this one. I think a great place to start is with Danette's question. So Danette, I'll throw to you. What was your question and why did you pick it?
Well, I thought because this was the first time we talked about branding, some of our listeners would be interested in, why is having a brand important, and actually what makes up a brand. So even just maybe starting with that one, because some people will be like, is it a logo? What is it? So Natalie, with your expertise, I thought this is really helpful for all of our listeners as well as for us too. So thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I love this question and I'm so glad we're starting with it because it's going to set such a nice foundation for our conversation. So we're going to talk about what a brand is in a couple of different ways. So to make sure that everybody can see themselves within a brand, I just want to be really clear that brands are just groups of humans exchanging value. It could be a single human or a group of humans, but we're just exchanging value, and we can really boil it down to that very simple concept. So you can start to understand and see right away that we're going to talk a lot about humans when we talk about brands. But your brand, so that's what a brand is. Your brand is the sum of every interaction that somebody has with your organization. So Grahame, you probably have had the most interaction with me of anybody here. We had 2 calls this week at least, right? So you would maybe have the most context of anybody. So I'll ask you second. Yeah. But Jez, I'll start with you. We'll give an example of this. You just met me. So could you describe me in one word, please?
I mean, the first word that comes to mind is fun.
Thank you. So you're right.
Great.
And even if I'm not fun, it doesn't matter because you're right, because that is the sum of every interaction that you've ever had with my brand, right? So that's like you've distilled all of it into that one word. And, hopefully as we get to know each other better through this conversation, that stays consistent. But ultimately, you're not wrong. Nobody's wrong. And so, Grahame, you've probably had the most interactions with me. So, and I'm nervous to hear what's coming, but can you describe me in one word?
I'm not sure how to spell it, so I don't know if I should use it. I was actually going to say the complete opposite of fun. No, I wasn't really. So the word that came to mind for me was effervescent.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we've spent quite a bit of time together, so hopefully, I've lived up to that. But that's what I'm getting to, is that every interaction that anybody ever has with your organization, whether that is they call one time and somebody answers the phone, and that one phone call is the only thing they have, or if they've, gone into your website and maybe they've read your blog, they've watched your videos. In your case, you have a podcast. You have those people that have listened to every episode of that podcast and they listen to how you interact with your guests. They're going to have, they're going to have a word to describe your brand, and whatever they say, they're right. Whatever they say, they're right. So it's really that sum of all of it. So it's that simple and that complicated.
That is such a brilliant way of explaining it. So thank you. And my word for you was happy, because I just look at you and you glow happiness. So
that's because she's had more interactions with me.
Actually, yes, that's 3 calls with Australia this week, isn't it? Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
It's a record breaker. Yeah.
Awesome. And I forgot to mention at the top, I was just going straight through this, but we're talking today about how your brand is a tool to build trust. I forgot to mention that at the top, but we did talk about a brand, so that's the important bit to get out of the top. I might jump into Alan's question, and Alan asked, I guess this is just sort of a sort of a good early question as well, is what are some ways that a brand can be devalued?
I love this question because one of the things I try to make sure that all my clients understand is that your brand is an asset. Like an asset, like your house is an asset. Your brand is an asset. And so if you think of your brand like an asset, That means as you invest in it and you maintain it and you care for it, it will increase in value. And as you do the opposite, if you neglect it, if you don't take care of it, if you don't maintain it, it will start to reduce in value. And just like your business is, saleable and has a dollar value, well, your brand is an asset within that business. So we all know when we're interacting with brands that have not been investing in the asset and that have not been maintaining the asset. Sometimes that means you can see it visually and, maybe design work that hasn't been updated since the late 90s, but not in a trendy way. You can hear it in the language that's used. It starts to really make itself obvious when a brand isn't maintaining that way. And so ways that you can devalue a brand is really making sure that, or not making sure that you're investing in maintaining that entire experience from end to end. And where we get into trouble is when people think a brand is just a logo and they don't think about what happens when someone answers the phone or when someone walks in the front door or when someone interacts with the owner in traffic and gets the middle finger from them and they're in a branded car. I mean, those are some of the ways that you can watch a brand deteriorate real quick.
I love that. And that actually, it's funny that you're talking about this, like the end-to-end experience. This reminds me of my first job, actually. And when I tell people about it, they go, oh, I hate that place because of what they do with this. So I was working at a place called Hog's Breath Cafe. And the whole thing, that's a sort of barbecue steakhouse restaurant in Australia. And one of the things that they always do is they get the waiters to come sit at the table when people are ordering stuff. So it can be a little intense. And most people really don't like it, but they say, like, it doesn't matter if you get complaints about it, please do it because it's part of the brand here. And what's funny is even when I bring it up to this day, people are like, yeah, I hated that, but but that was part of that whole brand experience. When you walk in, you expected this. And as you're talking about that, it's just reminding me of that.
That's really interesting because you'll talk about all these people that hate it. But can you tell me about the people that love it?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, it was a one or the other. It was either you loved it or hated it. So it was
Right?
definitely, it was definitely for some people and not for others. Like, I loved it, but I know a lot of people that are more introverted were horrified by it.
Well, when you find a brand that can attract, and brands are like magnets, they attract and repel in equal measure. So if your magnet is, kind of weak, it's not really attracting, like it's not pulling anybody in, but it's not really repelling anybody either. When you have a brand that's brave enough to start repelling people, like I don't want you sitting at my table probably, right? But if you are brave enough to start repelling people, then you are also brave enough to start really attracting those people that are going to be the most excited, that are going to feel like a sense of belonging in this place because it's different, just like them. And if they can feel like it's different, just like them, then that's where you really start to grow your brand in a way that some of those customers start to become your sales force, your brand ambassadors. They start bringing people in the door. They want to go find more people who are different, just like them, and they want a place to congregate. So it's really interesting when you see these strategies deployed that are kind of brave. But I love the saying that I heard once, and I don't know who said it. I wish it was just me. But it's that great brands are not for everybody. And I love it so much because the brands I love the most are certainly not for everybody, but boy, do I feel like they're for me.
That is a great way to look at it. And I love that. What a great way to put it. I love that magnet analogy. It's so smart. Thanks for that, Natalie. I might throw to Grahame now because I feel like it's a sort of semi-related question. So Grahame, what was your question and why did you pick it?
Thanks, Jez. Natalie, I'm pretty sure I said that. Well, I would have if I'd thought of it. Yeah.
Yes, I was quoting you actually. I think it was in that book of Grahame quotes I received for Christmas.
Such a small book. Such a small book, one page. My question sort of came out of, and part of it was, interestingly, the chat we had on the Epic masterclass on earlier in the week. I've been thinking about this whole idea of brand and trust, and particularly how we can build trust in a brand digitally. So when Danette and I first started Magical Learning, a lot of our work was face-to-face.
Right.
And it's so much quicker to build
Right.
trust in that space.
Yeah.
So then I was
Yeah.
thinking about, what are some of the potentials or the pitfalls for businesses who might be trying to build trust really quickly? Because what we, looking at our experiences with social media and online marketing, et cetera, in the past, it takes a lot more interactions to get to a point where somebody can feel that they can start to trust us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just curious about your experience with perhaps some of your clients or just other businesses that you've seen where they've tried to build trust really quickly, and what works and what doesn't work.
Okay, can I come back to the speed part? Because I want to talk a little bit about, I think, where we really miss the point on building trust as brands. So,
Sure.
Are you familiar with Delta Airlines?
Yep.
Okay. If I say Delta Airlines, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
For me, it would be different.
Okay, so a few years ago, they were in the news a lot, specifically in North America. I see some heads nodding. If anybody remembers, interrupt me and tell me what you think if you think of a headline, because I want to share, and I would love to see you recall it. So there's a couple things. So when I asked this 2 years ago, in any room across Canada, I'd go to 200 people, 5 people. I'd get 2 answers. I would get broken guitars, because they had broken someone's guitar and made national headlines with that. But then I would get, and they're American, we're Canadian, and then I would get the man that was bleeding on the plane. And there had been a doctor that was on this plane. I don't know what happened, but one of the flight attendants was trying to remove him from the plane and punched him in the face, gave him a bloody nose. And what went viral, and if you Google Delta and then push images, you will see an endless sea of memes that are jokes about this man getting drug off the plane with his face covered in blood, right? That is what you see when you Google Delta Airlines and go Google images on the internet. So what does that have to do with anything? Well, their tagline before that, during that, and remains, "Fly the friendly skies." Now, I could go to any room and ask, what do you think of Delta Airlines? Nobody said friendly. Everybody would say they break guitars or they break noses. That's it. So what happens in that instance is we get a real lack of trust, because what I call brand integrity. So I say I'm a brand integrity coach. I made that up, right? I made that up because here's what drives me bananas in this industry. Everybody wants to say what looks good. Everyone wants to say, fly the friendly skies, but it's not true. There's a lot of things that Delta could say that are true and that would be a value proposition that's true, but they want to say that they're friendly. And then and everything we can see is friendliness is not part of the value proposition. So now that what happens is they're out of integrity. So it doesn't matter that they say they're friendly and that they're not friendly. That doesn't even really matter. All that really retains is that you cannot trust them. I give the example often of let's say you have a little local pizza restaurant in town and you want everybody to know that you're going to have the fastest delivery. And that is your flag. That is your positioning statement. You are the fastest delivery in town. When you are not the fastest delivery in town, nobody cares that your grandmother grew tomatoes and you turn them into the best sauce ever. And you are the only people in town that have heirloom grandmother tomatoes with your own garlic that you also grew and you roasted it. And you spent, a year making this beautiful pizza sauce because you said you had fast delivery, when you should have been talking about your tomato sauce. So brands are in integrity when you are who you say that you are. And I feel like all I do is teach brands how to do that and how to stay in that. And the core of that means you build messaging that is so honest to what your organization is best at that you can't go off brand. So we never start with fast delivery. We figure out what's really actually special. And that's what we say about ourselves. So the first thing is we rush to a message because we rush to the message that we think is going to be like sexy and fast and it's going to look cool. And so we do that. So we rush to a message. We don't do the research. We don't do that internal, looking inward of our organization to figure out what is our actual true strength. We just say what we think will look good. And then we do it in the way that everybody else is doing it. So we want to do it so fast that we're like, oh, you know what? Look, everybody, all those popular leadership coaches on Instagram are using this font and they're doing these talking head videos with bouncing text. So I better do that. And it may not have anything to do with your strength. Like, Grahame, like, I don't think of you and like, I wouldn't want to see you go and mimic Gary Vee. Like, you're very funny. I would want to see you be funny. I loved when I looked today at your the podcast illustration that you have. It was so great because I could see you both in it, and it reflected the spirit. To me, it was very on brand. You want the experience to be consistent because your brand is that sum of every interaction. And so when I listen to the podcast, I hope you sound a lot like what it's going to be like when I meet you in person. Because if I go meet you in person and you're nothing like your podcast personality, then what happens is I can't trust you because your brand's out of integrity. So that was a very long answer. But
a really good one. A really good one. Thank you. And no, there's some great stuff in that, particularly the part where you said, I'm funny. Can we just loop that, Jess, like in post?
It's actually the whole podcast.
Yeah,
that'll be the meme. That'll be the meme of the century.
The meme.
I really do. Thank you for that. Thanks for the answer. So one of the thoughts in the back of my head was that this idea, and I don't know whether taglines to the right thing, but Delta fly the friendly skies, someone else the fastest pizza delivery. So taking the time to get really clear on what your core thing is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that it's true. Like, everybody wants to say that they want an aspirational message. You know what I mean? They're like, oh, I really want to be this. Our organization wants to be this. Well, that's your vision. And you should have a vision, right? You should have your brain should have a vision of the world you're creating that doesn't exist today. 100%. That's also not your outward core message. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's internal. That's something for you and your team to focus on. But when you have an external communication, that has to be reflective and honest of what's going to happen when somebody calls and somebody answers the phone. And if you say that you're friendly, better be friendly when that phone gets answered, or else you're just a liar. And it doesn't matter what you said.
Nice. Thanks, Natalie.
Awesome. Yeah, great answer. Thanks for that, Natalie. That was awesome. I might throw to John now for the curveball question. John. Go for it, John. What's your question? Why'd you pick it?
Well, when I saw the topic about brands and trust, I thought this is really interesting. And then I went to the website and saw you are a real estate agent. I thought that's disappointing because real estate agents are like used car salesmen, aren't they? Anyway, so I'm glad I didn't put that into a question. But when you take out, so my wife has got a business. We bought the business September last year. Yeah, I know. Sorry, you're supposed to be the funny one, aren't you, Grahame? She bought a business last year, and it's a property styling business. So she deals with real estate agents all the time. But she's trying to change the brand. You know, how do you go? I mean, and I get that the brand is an extension of yourself. So, but how do you get that across so people are aware that, you know, you've taken over something and it is actually different? Or how does Delta go about saying, yeah, forget the friendly skies, we're going to now be something else? And how do you do that? And how long does it take?
Okay, so I am a realtor. I have 2 businesses. And you're right. You are right. You know, like, before I get into your question, I just think it's really important to acknowledge that you brought up some really interesting stereotypes. And one of the coolest ways that you can build trust is deciding in your industry which stereotype about your industry you're going to disrupt, and then just continuing to do it all the time. Right. So, so whatever it is that people say about realtors, like, for example, pick one of those things and just own it and just disrupt. That's what, anyway, this side note. Yeah. So, okay. So how do you manage a rebrand? So can I, and am I clear that in your wife's business, she wants a rebrand? Like, she's going to do a whole new branding exercise?
No.
Okay.
So it's sorry. She's trying to put her own brand into it. So it's been someone else's business. They've run it their way. She wants to run it her way, which means improving what was there before.
Am I allowed to ask specific questions? Like, what is the name of the business?
Yeah, Elements Property Styling.
Elements of Property Styling? Elements
here
of
in
property.
Canberra or Canberra, New South Wales.
Okay, cool. All right. Okay. What's your wife's name?
Trisha.
Trisha. Is she new to this industry?
Nah, she's worked in it for about 3-4 years. She's done styling stuff in other areas before.
Yeah. Okay. Trisha, what's the last name?
Scollen Smith. Scollen Smith. SCOLLEN SMITH.
Okay.
Do you want a number? 0404.
I'm good.
No?
I'm good. No, you're on a podcast.
Can you just get her Medicare number as well, please, John?
Yeah, driver's license and bank details.
Here's
are
why
coming
I'm
through.
asking. So, so earlier I talked about your brand being an asset and has equity in your business and value in your business. One of the ways that when we're working on designing a brand, so you design your experience, you design your logos, you design your messaging. One of the things that I think is so important to design is your brand architecture. And your brand architecture is really the way that your services and sometimes your businesses are organized so that they transfer value between one another. And sometimes if you have different brands, they can end up competing with each other and actually diminishing value. So you really want to think, if I have, 2 brands that are valuable, how can I make that value flow back and forth? And so the reason I asked about Trisha's name was that if Trisha, let's say, has a good personal brand in your area and people know her for her work already, then I would really be considering bringing that into the name. So I would be considering Elements Property Styling by Trisha Scollen Smith.
Okay.
Right there.
Okay.
Brand name, right? And making sure that you have, so what that does is that if that business is already successful and it's already trusted and it already has a client base, then you are letting people know that overarching, system is there. However, we have an addition.
Okay.
We have something to add. We have something's different here, something's new here. And then when you do a brand, so this type of brand architecture takes that second brand, so it will be her personal brand, and it supports the first. So it's really kind of almost like a byline. So that first is the leading, but that you have the endorsement of Trisha. And that endorsement of Trisha means something, but it's not necessarily threatening the overall brand.
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
And it always, when we look at brand architecture and how we bring things like this together, there's a longer conversation usually about goals and, are those brands even valuable, right? Sometimes it's worth a rebrand. Sometimes the brand itself has to go actually, and it's time for a new brand. And then we do communications around that to talk about why. Working on a rebrand right now with an organization that wants to tell this. So we brought in a videographer. We're doing a documentary style video about why we're doing a rebrand. So that's how we will launch it. There's a lot of different tactics there, but real quick, if that business was purchased and it has clients who trust it, that's what I would do, is consider an endorsed brand and bring in her personal brand. Yeah.
Okay. Beauty. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great answer.
She's got some homework to do now. As in Trisha does.
You were all very encouraging. P.S. Every time I say anything, you're like, "Wow, that was awesome." I'm like, "Geez, you are all very encouraging."
But that makes sense to me. That it's the brand has got a following. It has got a reputation, and even though she wants to enhance that reputation by bringing in new products and lifting the style from what it was to what she wants it to be, that personal endorsement by Trisha or by however it goes sort of builds off that rather than scrap it all, start again.
100%, and it shows people that she's not scrapping it all and starting again. It communicates that. We don't always realize, people don't always think like a logo is a communication tool. A name is a communication tool. Like people don't always think of that, right? So immediately, I start to think visually now. So I don't know what her logo looks like, but let's assume Elements Property Styling is, in a kind of thicker, bolder font, and it's a wordmark logo. Am I right about that?
Yeah.
Okay, so then I would actually do a complementary font that looks very different. underneath with by Trisha Scollen Smith, and I would probably do a thin script font. So it almost looks handwriting, and you can have that very supportive, clear addition. Like it's clear that that wasn't there before because it's a little bit different. And even the change in font shows that something has happened. We can see a change. We can see an edit, you know, and it's like scribbled on after, you know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
No, nice note. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank
Yeah,
you.
wow. We're getting a bit of a masterclass here. Love that, Natalie. All right, Natalie, I might throw to Mark's question, which I think you've touched on a bit, but I think this is just, if there's any extra notes in this. And Mark's question was, if you're in a space with multiple brands that offer similar services or products, what are some ways to look at yourself and differentiate yourself? Will this cause issues around trust, and how authentic does it have to be?
Okay, so I did talk about differentiation a little bit. Sorry, I get excited there, but differentiation occurs when we disrupt a widely held stereotype. That's what differentiation is. Otherwise, you hear realtor and you're like, gosh, I know this about you, right? Like that, like the brand of realtor is a brand that I work at overcoming every single day, right? So hopefully by the end of this, like I've done that. And so that's really what it comes down to is when you work in a saturated space, you really want to choose one stereotype that you are going to commit yourself to disrupting. And then you start to do that in your communications, whatever that is. So that's kind of the best way. Can you read the second part of that question again? There was something about authenticity.
Yeah, sure. So the second part was, I guess it was like just following off of how some ways to differentiate yourself, and then will this cause issues around trust, and how authentic does it have to be?
So I don't. How authentic does it have to be? That sounds like so like it's an like, oh, do I have to be authentic, right? And I would love to reframe that as like, how authentic do I get to be? As an kind of an exciting thing. Like how cool is it that we live in a time where we can connect with our customers and our audience in a very like natural way online. We can pick up our cell phones and make a face video and send a text. That's really cool to me. And so the more that we can do that in our marketing and be ourselves, whether it's you're a solopreneur or you work in an organization of 200 people want to see the people. Because brands are just groups of humans, right? So if we can really do that and get honest about that, it makes your brand work so much easier. It's hard to get off brand if your brand is really, really honest. It's impossible. But where we get into trouble is where we create brands that don't come from, within. They're kind of that aspirational out there, the company you wish you were. That's where we start to get in trouble.
Great answer. And I think that's such a good way to look at it. Great. That's such I love that insight. I think the way that you're approaching this is so good because when I think of branding, sometimes I think, it's more sort of basic, like, can we do this with the graphic design? Can we do this? But what you're saying is more of a sort of ethos, I guess, that comes from within. And then that is what produces all the other stuff. So yeah. Great stuff.
So my business is called Marrow, right?
Mm-hmm.
And our tagline is what you're made of.
Mm.
And if I could do anything with my clients is all I want to do is help them really discover the truth inside that organization and then just tell it. But that's a lot easier said than done.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. All right. Well, I might jump into my question now. These are, I guess, Kanika and my questions are sort of a little bit different. And so I'll just start with mine, which is, I think it can be hard sometimes for brands to create advertising that's both genuinely engaging or novel while simultaneously advertising the features and benefits of a product. What is a ratio of trying to be genuinely interesting, but also trying to actually show off your products? And I guess the reason I'm asking this is, for me, one of the most memorable ads I've ever seen didn't advertise the product at all. It's this ad that Cadbury put out a while ago, which was someone in a gorilla suit playing the drums to what's that song?
In the Air Tonight.
There you go. Thanks, Grahame. Which didn't advertise chocolate at all, but for some reason it's really stuck in my mind. So I guess, that's just kind of what's sort of a good ratio of trying to be interesting versus trying to actually sell your product.
So I always like to say that the best ads don't even look like ads. Do you know what I mean? Like nobody is walking around on the planet being like, gee, I hope someone lands me with a sales pitch today. And we are overloaded with sales pitches. If you really like, one morning I was writing a talk, I was going to do a talk, and I thought, I was on my run and I was walking home, and I was walking home down our main street, and I thought, I'm going to count. I've got, in 60 seconds, I'm going to count how many ads I see. And I saw like 73 ads. Like I was like faster than a second. It was just crazy the amount of ads I saw in a minute. Maybe it's 2 minutes. Maybe that doesn't make sense. Maybe the math isn't mathing, but I saw an obscene amount of ads in that amount of time. And your brain can't even process it, but like we're exhausted by the amount of ads that we're served all the time. So I'm kind of giving you this context of just like what we're all experiencing, because there's no real answer. You're going to have to test that for yourself, right? You're going to have to test that with your audience. It's going to depend also on the products and services you sell. So I have a good friend that's a marketing manager for a big hardware chain. And, his world revolves around flyers and Facebook ads on pricing. Like all he does is product all day, because nobody cares about anything else. Like that's what he does, right? And that organization, they haven't been building a brand, or their brand is that we're cheap. Like, so for them, their value proposition is, we're going to show you product all day and we're going to talk about pricing all day. And that's all we're going to do. And it really comes down to, so your customers, what do they value? What are you selling? And then, what are your goals as an organization? And if you have the ability to ride out the long-term play and build value, then you're going to spend time engaging your customers, giving them value through content, building relationships in your ads, doing a lot of that, and understanding that long-term payoff is coming. But every once in a while, you do have to sell something. And so that ratio is going to be very personal to you and your audience. But the more that you can give, which is, and give value. So there's educational value, there's entertainment value, just making someone laugh because you're wearing a gorilla suit, that's valuable. And so the more that you can give, the easier it is when you ask. And that's that real kind of relationship piece.
Yeah, wow, that's such a good way to look at it again. I'm sorry, I'll just say that after everything you say, but it's a great lens to look at it through the
I'm
give and
keeping
take.
you.
Awesome. Well, we'll jump into the final question today, which is from Kanika, and it says, brands like Red Bull have a strong brand, but I guess this is sort of it's got a similar idea, but brands like Red Bull have a strong brand, but don't always talk about their product. What is that phenomenon? How does it increase trust, and how can other businesses utilize a bit of that magic?
Yeah, so that's exactly what I'm talking about, right? So the more you give, the more you build a relationship with your community, the more excited they are to reciprocate. And, one of the key elements of an engaged community is shared value. Like, so nobody wants to just receive all the time. They want to participate too. And maybe that's buying your thing, right? So there's that. But one of the things that this question, although it's not what it's asking, inspired me to think about when we're talking about kind of that magic and some of the phenomenons of marketing. There's a book that I read over 20 some years ago in marketing school called The Immutable Laws of Marketing. And it's still a fantastic book. It's just like, it's a keeper. And one of those immutable laws is the law of candor. And in that law of candor, and it's not like super on topic with the question, but it's important. The law of candor, one of the best examples I've ever seen of it is an old Volkswagen ad where they have the Beetle and it says, think small. It's an iconic ad. So you can go Google it and you can go read this ad, and the copy is all about how crappy the car is. Right. And it's like, it's smaller than the others and it doesn't go fast and like, you know what I mean? But it's like, as you read through it, you kind of find yourself like falling for the car. And at the end, you're really into this weird little car. It's a beautiful ad. And it's a great example of the law of candor. And the law of candor states that, and I just so believe this to be true. When you admit a negative, everybody believes you. If you're always just saying positives, people have to figure out if they can trust you and if they should believe you. But if you admit a negative, like, you don't have to do any convincing. You can drop the mic and leave. And so when you can bring that into your marketing, I admit negatives all the time that are irrelevant to why someone's hiring me. So trust comes down to two things: openness and competence. I feel so bad for Grahame, who heard me say all these things 2 days ago. So openness and competence. But you have to remember that when somebody's hiring you or buying something from you, they're asking you to be competent in that thing and only that thing. The other things beyond that are opportunities for openness. They're opportunities to engage the law of candor. So when someone's hiring me to be a marketing coach or a brand strategist, they're not hiring me to be a great speller. So I make a lot of jokes about how I'm actually a pretty good speller when I'm being thoughtful, but I go really fast. I make a lot of typos because I love to go fast. And so I make a lot of jokes. I leave typos in my Instagram posts all the time. And then I make fun of myself. And, we have like this whole little, like everybody in my audience knows, like, I'm going to do that and I'm going to leave it there. And it sounds so silly, but it's a trust builder that doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt because it builds my openness with my audience, and it doesn't diminish my competence because it's not what they're hiring me to be competent at.
Perfect. That's great. Awesome. Well, I thank you so much for today's conversation. We really appreciate it. I'm just going to go quickly around the room and just grab some final thoughts. So I might start with Danette. Danette, any final thoughts on how your brand is a tool to building trust, or just today's conversation?
I love this. And you really opened my eyes around the fact that this is really about that human connection, which I'd not ever thought of it that way. So thank you, Natalie. Natalie, that was fabulous.
Thank you.
And a hug. Sending a hug.
A big hug.
John, I might go to you. Any final thoughts on today's conversation or how your brand is a tool to build trust?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. My word, when you were asking that at the beginning, and only having just met you for 30 seconds and listening to you speak, was bubbly or effervescent, and you've lived up to that. I like your statement that the maths doesn't math, and I'm still trying to do that in my head. But I was very much thinking that coming into this, a brand was the logo. It wasn't the person that sort of perpetuates what it is that the company's all about. So that's an interesting thought for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. And Grahame, I'll throw to you. Any final thoughts on today's conversation or how your brand is a tool to build trust?
So many. I've got a page and a bit of notes. Natalie, thank you. Seriously, it's been amazing. This is absolutely a conversation that could go on a hell of a lot longer. For those who might be listening in or watching, I also want to acknowledge that some genius who would probably be called Brian in North America failed to check time zones. So Natalie is actually very generously jumped onto this session today at 9:30 p.m. So thank you for that. Really appreciate it.
My
and
pleasure.
I'll have a chat with Brian afterwards about getting his act together. The Brian thing it's a long story, but apparently that's what Grahame sounds like to particularly Americans.
Okay.
Really weird.
Okay.
So there's an issue with my brand.
Okay. Or maybe not. Maybe not.
Or maybe not.
Oh no, there are issues with his brand. Thank
you, John. And you're welcome too, by the way, for the free plugs for your wife's business. No, Natalie, look, seriously, thank you. It's been fantastic. You are amazing. I'm very grateful that you agreed to come on the podcast. So thank you so much. And
so glad to be here.
We will have some conversations with you after this, if that's okay.
I would love to. Yeah.
Not immediately after this, maybe next week.
Awesome. And
back to you, Jess.
Thank you. And I also want to say thanks so much for the conversation. It's always nice when we get to mix up the topic a little bit. And this has just been such an insightful one. I feel like I learned something from every answer there. But before we go, Natalie, I just wanted to grab any final thoughts you have on today's conversation or how your brand is a tool to build trust.
I'm just really grateful that you brought this conversation to the leadership space, because I think we want to put businesses and brands in this little box as if they have this magic formula that's different than us being humans, just as humans. And it's not different. And so I'm so glad when I have the opportunity to sit down with people, particularly in leadership in spaces like yours, and we can really sit down and talk about how our work is the same. because we're all just getting humans to take action, right? And that's something I'm really grateful for, because I think that everyone's a marketer, and we just have a lot of weird hangups about what that means. So today, hopefully, we brought some of those down.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for the conversation. If people want to go check out Natalie, you can go to nataliedavison.ca. The link is going to be in the podcast description. Is there anywhere else, Natalie, you want people to check you out?
Absolutely. If you're looking for marketing information, you can check me out on Instagram, and our handle is @MadeMarrow. And that is where you will hear me talk about marketing all the time.
Awesome. Well, that link is going to be in the podcast description. You can go click that right now. But otherwise, I just want to say to everybody, thank you so much for being on the call. All our regulars, Nelly, thank you for being on the call. And to everybody listening at home, have a magical week.